upon creating a sample application for a mortgage calculator. It will be a single page app and it will have the fields as displayed on the UI in the PowerPoint. It will have a home value, down payment, mortgage amount, and mortgage amount will be simply calculated by subtracting the home value from the down payment, but will demonstrate the usage of both outlets and actions. Then we'll have a loan duration, which will be a picker, and from the UI picker, we'll either pick 15 years or 30 years as the loan duration. And based on that, a rate will be computed, like 15-year will be have slightly lesser rate than the 30-year mortgage. And eventually we'll display what your monthly payment will be. There will be an option to reset the entire input as provided by the user, or go forward, hit the compute, and compute is what's going to calculate your mortgage amount. Simple application. We're going to do it in two steps. First step is to compute the mortgage amount, and then we can move forward on computing loan duration, though all the elements of the UI will be fully interactable on the UI screen, so user may choose a loan duration before the mortgage amount, so we'll have to handle those conditions. Let's start off by creating a new Xcode project. It will be a single page app, and we go forward and give it a name. The mortgage calculator seems as good a name as any. The rest everything I'm going to leave the same. I'm going to use storyboards. So let's jump into this one. I'm going to create it on the desktop itself for now. And of course, Xcode goes forward and creates the basic file structure for us. For now, we're just going to keep it as it is. The launch screen will be empty, so I'm gonna just go forward and add a label to the launch screen. Call it mortgage calculator, and I'm gonna just control enter it so that I can put it into two lines. I have two lines, I have disclosed that. I'm gonna take this field and increase the font up a bit so that it's visible, and I will have to increase the size of my label, which I did, and I'm also going to center adjust it, and I should probably correct the spelling as well. Okay, so done. My mortgage calculator is now center lined. Again, it's center lined for whatever device I am viewing it for. It's iPhone 11 at this point in time, and it's not aligned for all the possible device types and orientations, but that one topic is more to come later. So I got the launch screen. Now I'm going to go to the main storyboard. I need to add a bunch of labels: home value, down payment, and mortgage amount. So let's go forward and add that. Quickly going over it, I'm gonna add is home value. What's the price of the home I'm buying? I'm going to add another one for my down payment amount. Okay, so some payment will be done by me upfront, and then I'm going to compute the mortgage amount. Okay, all good and dandy. Now I can go forward and align all of them vertically, which I'm going to do. Then I'm going to add some text fields. And the first one I'm going to add is the home value. Now, a few things about this is a text entry. I can add some default text to it if I want to, so that I don't have to go forward and have the user add anything. But home value is not something I can tell. Each house can have a different price, so not gonna enter it. But I do would add a placeholder, just like a ghost text. The reason I would add it is that so the users know the format I expect them to enter the values. I do not expect them to enter any dollar signs or commas, so I'm entering the full straight value for now. Also, I want to mention the type of keyboard that I expect to open up when you run my application. So I expect a number pad to open up here. So I'm going to add a number pad as a keyboard type for this particular text field. Let's go forward and do the same thing for down payment. And for the down payment, the ghost tax can be, I'm encouraging, for example, 20% down payment. So I put it $60,000. And I will have the keyboard type, and the keyboard type will still be number pad. The mortgage amount will all be a label. The reason is that user is not allowed to enter the value, they're just able to see the value. And I do not want it to just say label. I will say to be calculated, and I'm going to choose a color, and I'm going to use system blue color as a color to be used here. All good. So all done. Now let's say that I do not have any buttons on it. All I want is that user to go forward, enter the home value, down payment, and I want the mortgage amount to automatically be displayed. And it's simple, home value minus down payment. Let's see how we can go about this one. So first, let's create some more room for ourselves. And now let's go forward and open up the assistant mode. I'm gonna have the view control open in one, and I do have the storyboard open in the other window. And I am now going to provide some connections. I know that I do need the value of which is being stored in home value. So I do need that. So let's go forward and select the text field and then press the control key and drag and drop. This will give me option to basically insert an action or an outlet. I want an outlet, and the outlet is basically going to be home value or text entry. Okay, so it is UI text field. Okay, all good. So I'm gonna enter this and I get my outlet. Second thing, I'm gonna drag and drop my down payment. I'm gonna do the same thing, just gonna call it down payment text entry. Done. Now I have handled to both the text fields, so all's good there. What I want is also a capability to go forward and show uh, that the new value of the mortgage amount. Now, there's no guarantee the user is going to enter home value first and down payment. The user may go forward and enter the down payment first and then the home value. And what I can do is that once they have done entering value for home value, I can go and check if they have already entered the down payment. If both have been entered, then I can go forward and compute the mortgage amount. And I can do the same thing for the down payment text editing to end to see if the home value is present or not. So what I'm trying to do is that once the user has done entering a value in home value down payment, I want to go forward and check should I go forward and compute mortgage amount, and if I can, I just want to update the label to be calculated to the right value. So let's see what actions are available to us. So again, control, click, drag, drop, and this time I want an action. As soon as I choose action, there are a bunch of events which open up. So these are all the events which are available for text field. And editing did end is the one which I'm interested in. So seems like the right one to do. And I'm going to say compute mortgage amount. Cool. And the type can be your text field. It's not any. So I'm going to go forward and set it up. Now I want to go forward and do the same exercise when the down payment is being called. There is no really a single way to actually say that okay, there's already a method and connect to that method. You will have to go forward and choose the action, and the editing did end. You'll have to enter the same name, and then you choose your text field and say connect, and you are going to get an error saying that well you have two definitions of that particular method, and you can simply go forward and delete one, whichever you don't like. And I deleted one, I'm left with one, so no more issues. Now I just want to do home value minus down payment, straightforward. But the catch is that the home value may or may not have been entered. Okay, it's implicit, optional. So I have to check whether the value has been entered by the user or not. The best way to do that is optional binding. So I'm going to start with the syntax. I'm going to say if home value string as captured from the home value text entry is there, and the down payment string as retrieved from down payment text entry is there, then go forward and try and do the computation. Okay, all good. Now these are going to still return me strings, and what I'm interested is in integers to actually do the subtraction. So what I need to do is that I will have another set of optional binding which will get me the home value from the string, and this call for integer passing on the string is an optional. So that's why you see that, okay, it's having, um, it's allowing me to have the let syntax and down payment equals integer of down payment string. Okay, so if both these conditions are met now, then what's going to happen is I have the home value and I have the down payment. So both are now available for my consumption. And I am going to go forward and simply update this label. But to do so, I need this labels outlet. So somehow I can actually go forward and update the label. So I'm gonna say that mortgage amount. So it seems like a good label to have, and enter the value mortgage amount. So mortgage amount dot text, it's going to be text, it's going to be string, so I can put a double quote. Dollar sign seems about right, and then I can say home value minus down payment, and that should give us the text what we want to go forward and display. Now it's actually complaining here, and let's see, requires you a text field to confirm to string protocol, and it's thinking is in the assumption that I am using the text field, because what I did was I simply went forward, assigned text field here accidentally. I should have used and retrieved the text out of the text field before I went forward and executed it. So this should resolve the issue. Now I am actually pointing to the string and then converting the string to numbers, and then computing the mortgage amount. Let's go forward and test our application. So let's launch our application. I'm launching, I don't want to launch on an iPod Touch, so I'm going to cancel out of this. I'm going to choose iPhone 12 and I'm going to launch it. It's the first launch. For the first launch, it requires some setups. Mortgage launch screen is there, mortgage calculator. From the launch screen, it's going to move on to my main storyboard. So all my fields are displayed correctly: home value, down payment, mortgage amount. I'm going to go forward. Let's go forward and enter a home value. I'm going to choose the home value as $400,000. I'm going to recommend 20%. So I'm going to say that, okay, I'm going to pay $80,000. And yes, my mortgage amount is $320,000. If it would have been $600,000, then I'm supposed to have the mortgage for $520,000. So I can see that all the mortgage amounts are being computed correctly. Let's go forward and see if the reverse is happening correctly as well. We can go forward and simply choose the reverse direction and say that, okay, what if I enter the down payment first? So I went forward and said, okay, I'm going to pay a down payment, or I have a pay, I can make a down payment of $50,000 again, and nothing got computed at that point in time because I know that my home value has not been specified. So I went forward, specify my home value, and now the mortgage amount is being computed correctly. Yes, you can argue that I should handle on more conditions, that the home value handled should be greater than the down payment value and vice versa. And those are all simple checks. Once you have the logic working, once you have a handle to actually read the values as enter the text field and then compute call upon a function, then of course you can add all those validations and add labels. I'm just going to ignore them for the time being. So we're done with the first half of the problem. We can compute the mortgage amount. Now we want to capture the loan duration, which is going to be a UI picker, and then compute the rate from the loan duration, and then eventually finally display what my mortgage amount will be once the user presses compute. Now that we have calculated the mortgage amount based upon the home value and the down payment, the next step is to find out what's the rate of interest we're going to apply. To compute the rate of interest, we definitely need to know what's the tenor of the loan. Is the customer going to go for 15 year, 20 year, 30 years? For simplicity, we're just going to provide a default option where we prompt the customer to choose a rate and then go forward with just 15 or 30-year rate. Now, the best way of doing so in iOS is to go forward and choose the picker view. So let's go forward and add the functionality. And what we're going to do is that I'm going to go back and add first of all the label. The label is going to be my loan duration. So let's go forward and add loan duration. The next element which we want to add is the picker view. So you can go forward and search for picker view and you find date picker in the picker view. We are interested in picker view. So let's go forward and place it. And we're going to resize it so that it fits in the space which we have available. I can just shrink it in size and it fits up nicely. Okay, now I definitely need to change the values which are available for the picker view, which I will be, right? These are just default values which are shown. But once we're done with this task, I also want to show, like if you select 15 years, what's the rate I'm going to apply? So I want to show that. So let's go forward and drop the label here. And the label will be rate APR. And we can start with the default value. So I'm going to drop another label in here, and the default value can simply be to be determined. Okay, so we have not yet calculated the rate. Now that all is done, I know that the rate which is to be determined is something that I want to go forward and change. So I need a handle to this label, and it says to be determined here. I'm just going to do control drag and drop, and I will get my handle to the outlet, and I'm going to name is rate APR so I can connect to it. The second piece is the loan duration itself, because I will have to implement some methods on top of it. So I go forward and get a handle to the loan duration picker. All good. Now for the loan duration to go forward and toggle, okay, I need to go forward and they have some values. There are some values that should come up here, like selected duration 15 years, 30 years, which means that I need a data source. I need to tell UI picker what is the data source from where it's getting these values. Also, I want to handle actions like what if the customer chooses 15 years, something needs to happen. So the customer selected 30 years. So I need to be the delegate to handle those actions, and I do so by actually going forward and telling that my view controller actually implements the UI picker view delegate and the UI picker view data source. And in my view data load function, which is available here, I can now go forward and simply say that for my picker view, which is defined, okay, loan duration picker, okay, who is my delegate, who's going to handle those actions itself, because I'm going to implement those methods. I can also go forward and say that who's the data source, and the data source is also going to be self, because I'm going to implement all the required functions in the same class. Now, since I extended it, it's immediately giving me error message saying that, well, there are some functions defined in the protocol which are not optional. So I must go forward and implement them. So these are the functions. I can just hit fix and it goes forwards and populates them. I go forward and now look at those functions. The first one is number of components. Here you're seeing one column, like Sunnyvale Cupertino. This is one component. Now, picker view can have multiple components. Just imagine a slot machine which has three different columns, rolling seven and other numbers. So similarly, picker view can have multiple components. For our case, it will be one. So I'm just going to hard code it to one. The second one is what's the number of rows that are present in each component. And here I want to show the 15-year, 30-year, and other items to be present. So let's go forward and introduce enum, which can do which can take care of all the possible options which are applicable here. And I'm going to associate some raw values to that enum. So I'm going to tell them the raw values are of type string, and it will be first one is case is going to be select, and the raw value is going to be select duration. All good. Second one is going to be 15 years, and for the label for 15 years we can just say 15 years. Next one will be 30 years, and For the label, I can just say 30 years. Okay. So this is basically my enum. Now I have a data source, so I need to populate it. I'm going to go forward and define array. And I'm going to define a constant array because for now these values are hard coded. So this will be the duration array. Okay, so duration options. It's going to be an array, and array is going to be made up of the elements which are defined in this enum. So I'm simply going to go forward and and simply list down the values from the enum that I am interested in. At present, I'm interested in all the values, so I go forward and list them down. So this is my array. Now also, I need to figure out a way to map these selections to a possible interest rate. Now in a real app, once a user chooses like 15 years, 30 years, even these options or these are probably coming from a service call. In our sample app, I'm just hard coding it. Similarly, once the user selects an option, there will be a rate, which will be the current rate which is available for the 15-year option, which will be coming from a server call. Um, for now, we don't have any server side components, so we're just gonna hard code some of these options. So for this, let me go forward and define a dictionary, and we just call it rate map. It is going to use type annotation to say that okay, it will be a string map to a double to specify the rate, and I'm gonna go forward and initialize it. Now I can go forward and also define a private function which will be populate rate map. And what I'm doing in the populate rate map is simply I want to go forward and have an option available for all of these values that are defined here. So I have a rate map and I need to go forward and list down all the possible options that are present. So for populating, the best or easiest way to do so is I'm going to start picking up the options with like the way I populated the array, or I can just loop through an array. So let's do for duration in duration options, and I'm gonna put a switch on the duration, and I'm going to define the cases. The first case is going to be like loan duration dot 15 years dot raw value, and if that is the case, then for my rate map I would want to insert a key, and the key is going to be the same key as the raw value. And let's say for a 15-year loan, we are getting 2.75. So all good there. Second one, I need to do the same exercise for a 30-year mortgage. So I'm going to go forward and define the rate map for a 30-year mortgage, just like I defined for the 50-year mortgage. And let's say it's going at 3.00. Now I need to have default statement, which is good because I do have a default value to handle. And for now, I'm just gonna assign it some insane value like 100. And that will be in case you did not choose a selection. Okay, so I went forward and exhausted all my switch case statements. I will go forward and also call populated map in view did load, so it gets pre-populated. So now I have the elements which are needed. I just need to make sure that I take the data source which is hard coded now and assign it the right values to my picker. And if I'm in number components of one, here I'm supposed to return back integer. So I'm just gonna go for explicit return and return. And now for here, number of components, number of rows in component is duration options dot count. Okay, that gives me the number of rows that I'm supposed to display here. I also want to set the title for these rows. So let's go forward and say title for row, and I get the picker view title for row. It takes a string, so I'm gonna just simply go forward and try and return the value. I have that in the duration options, but how do I know which row I'm referring to? Well, that is simple because it has a row index which is present here. So I can simply go forward and say row, and that will return me the right title. So all good here. Till now, I have linked all these elements up together. I can hit the play button and let's see what happens. Now, I should be able to see the right elements populated in the picker. Okay, so you can see selected duration, 15 years, 30 years, everything is there. A rate is to be determined here because I didn't really go forward and set those values. Now, as the user goes forward and changes, like say from 15 years, 30 years, I want the rate to be populated here automatically without the customer having to click the button. So I will go forward and implement delegate method did select row. Now, when did select rows gets called, I get to get notified that okay, which element has been selected. Now I just need to display the rate associated with that particular element. Now it's telling me what was the row that was picked up. Okay, so that portion I already know. So if I go forward with a statement like duration options row, I can immediately get hold of the label which was associated here. And with the label, I can look up in the rate map dictionary and get the rate which is associated with that particular label, like 15 years, 30 years. Now, the catch is whenever you look up in a dictionary, by default, you are going to get an optional back. Okay. So if I want to map to a current rate, I can basically go forward and use if statement. Say if current rate is equals to the rate map something, okay? Then the current rate represents the rate which is available right now. And now here I need to define, and probably never not, I don't intend to change it, so I'm just going to say let. Now, current rate stores the unwrapped value of the label which is associated with the row which has been selected for row duration. I need to take the rate associated, which I'm getting here in the current rate, and put it for the rate APR, which is to be determined right now. For that, I had already went forward and had an outlet defined, which was rate APR. So I'm going to just call rate APR and call text and simply state what my APR should look like. And it's going to be a percentage. So I already have the current rate. So I'm going to go forward and say that is how my rate should look like. Let's save this and hit the play button. Let's see what happens. So by default, it is to be determined. Okay, all good. And now I go forward and change it to 30 years. Okay, it becomes 3%. I change it to 15 years. It becomes 2%, 5%. I select the duration. I remember the duration. I had set it to 100%. So it becomes 100%. And I could have simply gone forward and chosen a different value, but I intentionally defined it as a double. So I didn't want it to handle this case, but I can have this case handled here itself, where I go forward and try and look up the rate option, and if it matches selected duration, go forward and set the value as to be determined, or please select a value kind of element. But you can clearly see that okay, by adding the loan duration, as soon as we pick individual elements inside a picker, we can go forward and update the UI elements on the screen. So now we have the mortgage amount, we have the loan duration, now we have the rate. Now we can go forward and compute. For compute, we can go forward and add another label where we're going to display what your final mortgage amount is going to look like. We can also go forward and have a buttons which the customer presses to compute the mortgage. Let's go and add those now. For this, we are going to need at least a button which will ask the user to go forward and compute their mortgage amount, and a label where we're going to go forward and display the computed amount. So let's get going and add those. First one, like we said, okay, we need a button. So I went forward and got a button for ourselves, and I'm just going to call it compute. And the second piece which we are going to need, let's just line it up for now, is the label. So we are going to go forward and put in a label on the screen. And I'm just going to say is mortgage amount, but you will see that, okay, there's not a point showing it on the screen immediately. Uh, we can have something like to be computed, but we can probably leave it blank as well and have it appear on the screen as and when needed by the user. So let's go forward and add the hooks first. First one is I need an outlet to actually display the label. So I will do press the control key, drag and drop here again with my rest of my outlets, and I would say mortgage label. That becomes my outlet. Second thing I'm going to do is that on the click of compute, I need some pieces of code to be executed, and that's an action. And I'm just going to call as compute mortgage. Done. Now that is done, I can simply go forward and nullify it. I just wanted to avoid that, otherwise I will have to go forward and find the label and then control drag. I could have done that. Just wanted to keep something in there so it's easy for me to identify. Now I want to compute the mortgage. I have everything I need. Let's say user hits the compute button, it will get called. And here I know it's a UI button. So instead of standard being any, I'm just gonna say UI button, just in case I need to refer to it. Cool. So for computing the mortgage, what do I need? I need the loan amount. Okay, I know the mortgage amount. I need the loan duration. The user has chosen the loan duration, and I need the loan tenor, which is 15 years or 80 or 30 years multiplied by 12 for the number of months. Again, very easily computable, but I need to pass this information along. Now, when I need to pass a bunch of information along, I can definitely pass that as individual parameters, or I can define my own custom models, or these are simple classes with stored properties that we actually go forward and pass along, and they logically group the stored properties together. And it follows the whole MVC discussion that we have done earlier in the course. So let's go forward and the mortgage calculator, do the control click, and you can choose a new group instead of the new file, new group. And I'm going to say that I'm going to store my models here. And then I'm going to say that I want to go forward and create a new file. It's going to be a Swift file. And I am going to call it as collateral. Okay, let's go forward and create it. So it's collateral file is created. It's going to be a class, which is going to be collateral. Okay. I define my class, and it's going to have a bunch of stored properties inside it. And I'm going to have, first of all, the loan duration. Okay, so loan duration, and it's going to be integer. Then I need to have the loan amount is going to be integer, and I am going to have the rate to be applied, and there's APR, and it's going to be of type double. There's a class, so you must initialize these stored properties. These are not optionals. So I'm going to go forward and simply initialize all of them. I'm going to say loan duration, which is going to be type integer, loan amount, which is going to be of type integer, and rate APR, which is going to be of type double. And inside, I can simply refer to them by self. So self dot loan. So I'm basically setting the global stored properties using the parameters which are actually passed in this function call. Um, and I need the loan duration. So let's go forward into the loan duration, and then I'm going to go forward and say rate APR equals to the rate APR. Okay, done. Okay, we're done with the collateral class, which will have all the required attributes we need to compute the final mortgage amount. Now we need to have another model, which is going to be my mortgage class itself, which is actually going to compute the mortgage. So I'm going to define a mortgage class. So I'm going to go forward as a class mortgage. And in the class mortgage, I'm going to have a function which is going to be available, which is going to accept a parameter of type collateral and going to go forward and compute the mortgage. So goes forward and computes the mortgage. So all done. So I now have the code in place which can go forward and compute the mortgage. We'll come back to some of the aspects of MVC later, but for now I have models which are defined. From my view controller, I just need to make sure that first of all, I do have the button for compute, but once it's actually invoked, I'm passing on the collateral information over. So step one, let's go forward and get the collateral information. So I'm going to define my private function. Okay, create collateral model. And this is going to return a collateral type back. So let's go forward with it. We are going to say, I'm going to define collateral. And it is going to be of type collateral, I can say, right? Or I can simply go forward and call its initializer. Okay. Now I had gone forward and there's no default initializer which was provided by me. So I cannot go forward and use the default initializer. But I do have a bunch of elements which are available to me. First is I do have the rate which is being used right now. And for now, what I was doing was I was computing the rate and then simply going forward and assigning the rate to the text field which was shown. I want to do something more than that. First of all, I want to go forward and know which field was chosen. And based on that, set the value of my loan tenor. I also want to go forward and set the value for my rate. And I do have the loan amount, which is already computed, so I can use it. Now, instead of going forward and defining it here in the create collateral, I could do is I can go forward and define everything at the parent level class itself. Oh, sorry, in the parent level method itself. But the catch there is that I do not have a default initializer which is available for collateral. Now, if I go forward and try and assign default initializer like this, I'm going to get some heartache because now I have gone forward and defined my initializer, but I have not really initialized anything. These are all variables which have been defined, but I didn't go forward and initialize any of these elements, which is the reason why I'm not actually using the default initializer, and that's why we have the compute collateral function which is defined in our class. So let's go back to the view controller and let's fix the pieces, and I'm going to move out of the system view for now. So we can see it on the bigger screen. Oh, I'm going to fix this definition later. But for now, I know that there's a bunch of information that I need to have stored for building this collateral. And first one is the loan amount. So let's go forward and use it. So I'm going to find a variable loan amount. It is of type integer. And let's see, I'm already computing it and displaying it on the screen. And I'm doing that in the mortgage amount text field. So I can go forward and just say loan amount equals home value minus down payment here and simply use the loan amount here. Okay, so done. So I now have my loan amount which is available to me. The second piece is basically the rate which I'm actually showing. So let's go forward and just say that rate is double and I want to go forward and use it. Here I'm computing the current rate, so I can simply say is self dot rate equals current rate. So that takes care of me knowing the rate. The last piece is basically knowing when to go forward, and we'll come to this one later. Don't worry about it. It's just complaining that I did not find the initializer, but these are not optional parameters. So we're going to address those in a bit. The next piece which is left is the loan duration. Now what I'm doing is about populating the roll rate map. I'm going through the case statements. I'm identifying the case and then setting those values. And in here, I have information about which row was chosen by the user, but I'm using it only to compute the the rate because it's a dictionary. So I'm just using it to compute the rate which was associated with that particular loan. Now the thing is, there's no um, uh, when I was creating this dictionary, I didn't decide to go forward and create any complex type there. So as a result, I don't have information about the loan tenor itself associated there. One way to do that is to actually simply go forward and associate with, because I know which role was selected by the user, case statement. So I'm going to go forward with this for now. And I already know how to write the case statement. This is for individual rows, so I can simply go forward and copy the switch statement which I was using here. I'm going to put that switch statement in my picker view here, and instead of being on the duration duration alterations, it's going to be on the row which was selected by the user. So it's on the duration row, and if the value matches these elements, then I know which option was chosen by the user. Now I'm interested only in the two options which are listed here. So I am trying to go forward and compute the tenor. So I'm going to say tenor, and it's going to be of type int, which is I cannot have any random values present in there. And I need to know that because when I'm defining these tenors, I'm going to simply go and multiply 15 by 12 years to find out the tenor. I'm going to go forward and define 30 by 12 here. I need to do something for the default because cases have to be exhaustive. So I will have to go forward and say tenor, and I can go forward and define the tenor to whatever I think is the right value. For now, I can choose like 12, but in reality, you would not want to do stuff like this. You wouldn't like to set any default tenors on those options because, well, it doesn't make sense to have a default. You will have some sort of validation which will be protecting against you not being enabling the button. So this piece of code should never actually be executed. Um, Now, let us say these were the values. So I have gone forward and made sure that all those values are actually populated. All I need to do here is to define a constant object collateral, and it's going to be of type collateral, but I can just go forward and call its constructor so that I don't have to go about worrying about uh, um, type annotating it. And let's going back to my class loan duration. I know how exactly how to do it. I have to go forward and define the loan duration, and the loan duration is going to be self dot, okay, tenor. Loan amount is going to be self dot loan amount, and the rate is going to be self dot rate. Since I'm just creating the constructor, I can just return it directly here. So now in my compute mortgage button, I can get hold of the collateral model, and I can go forward and call compute mortgage. So in my mortgage class, which was defined, okay, was did not had anything like say did not had any stored properties. So I can just go forward and call compute mortgage, and in here for passing the collateral, I can simply say self dot create collateral model. Okay, so it will go forward and compute the collateral model. The return type for this self dot compute mortgage, if we jump to the definition here, is going to be of type double. Oops, loan duration. Okay, so it's going to be of type double. So I need to take that and use that to create my final string, which I want to display in my label for my mortgage amount. And I know that I have a mortgage label which is available. So I'm going to say mortgage page label dot text, and I can use string interpolation here. Okay, and I can say is mortgage, I can say monthly mortgage amount is this many dollars. Okay, so let's go forward and see how it looks. Sorry, I'm getting one compilation error here. Quickly jumping up. Oh, it had no initializer, and this goes back that I have these properties which are actually defined, but I didn't define an initializer for my view controller itself. So let's go forward and resolve that. I can go forward and define some initializer to handle those values. I can make them optional and set some values for them later. For now, I am just going to define some random items so that I don't have to worry about it, but you get the idea. Do not go forward and define some random values for these. The better practice is to use them as optional or add an initializer. Um, so for the tenor, I was going forward with 30 into 12. Okay, let's go forward and execute it. Now, waiting, and the mortgage calculator comes up. And your screen shows up. I'm gonna start choosing the values. Let's go for with $400,000 as the amount. I'm gonna make 80,000 down payment. $320,000 is my mortgage amount. I'm gonna go for a 15-year loan, which is at a 2.75% APR. And when I go forward and print it, the label is too small, so it could not fit everything in here. So let's go forward and quickly address the issue. So I'm going to go back to my main storyboard, choose my label, make it a bit bigger so it always fits up on the screen, and hit the play button again. Sorry about that. We'll have to just put in the values once again. Okay, duration 15 years. Compute, and you can see the value. Now of course it's floating point, so it's actually showing a big number. That doesn't look nice. You probably want to format it, and you can do so by calling the string.format function. It's available in the UI kit. uh, um, in the UI kit, there's a string extension which is defined, which includes it. So if you are importing UI kit, you already have that. You don't necessarily have to do anything special about it. So you can go forward and start using that variable to go forward and format the code inside the expression. So say string, and you can choose to call the format specifier, uh, and you guess an argument that you want to pass, and the format specifier will be something like percentage point to f. So it's a floating point for the two decimal places so that you can just prettify the loan amount that is going to be displayed on the screen. Let's just change the values this time for fun's sake. I'm still supporter of paying 20% down payment, so my loan durations are going to look like that. And you can see that okay, my monthly mortgage amount is $2,714.49. So with this, you can see how simple it is on iOS to actually go forward and create a single page app. There's more stuff that you probably would want to add about it, and we're going to talk about it in more details, like what happens if I rotate my device to a landscape mode, or what if I want to actually see this on an iPod or a smaller screen iPhone or an iPad. And what if I want to have other functions inside it, like I have a mortgage calculator, but I want to add an amortization schedule to this mortgage calculator. Or I want to have another functionality where people can look up the homes and look up at the values, something like Redfin does. We're going to cover that in separate videos. For now, you can now I hope you by now you understand how you can use actions and outlets to create a single page app on iOS.